West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Go down the list of what the United States has given Ukraine so far. $13.6 billion. As David Ignatius said, just an extraordinary amount of arms flowing across the Polish-Ukrainian border. My sources high up in the administration, at the Pentagon, telling me that there are weapon systems going over there that we don't even know about because they don't want Putin to know about them. And of course, that's the way it should be. Is there a growing sense of frustration at calls to do more when in fact, as the ambassador said, who agrees we need to do more, what has been done thus far is nothing short of historic. Let me say that again for people writing snarky op-eds about this administration and about Congress and about the United States response. What has happened over the last 3 weeks is nothing short of historic. And anybody suggesting that Donald Trump would have done any of this is please start your clown show somewhere else. We don't want to watch it. We don't want to hear it. Now back to the question, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Is Joe Biden getting frustrated at this point, despite this historic alliance, despite the historic aid flowing into Ukraine, that he is still getting attacked domestically?
Yeah, I posed this very question while at the White House yesterday to several administration officials, and the answer was there is some frustration from the White House towards domestic politicians, Republicans namely, but a few Democrats as well, who are promoting unrealistic scenarios, including that no-fly zone. But officials really stressed to me there's no frustration toward President Zelensky, who is, yes, asking for things that the President Biden can't provide, but they understand it. His country's very existence is at stake. They understand why he is doing so. Joe, I have some details here for what we're going to hear from President Biden today. He's going to speak in the hours after Zelensky makes his address to Congress. It's going to be $1 billion of aid. About $800 million of that is new. It's going to be, a lot of it is devoted towards anti-air, anti-armor weaponry, including the javelins and stingers that have proven so effective to this point against Russian vehicles. The president's going to talk about that today. He will know, aides know that Zelensky's going to ask for the no-fly zone again. He's going to ask for those jets through Poland. The answer, at least on the administration side, is still no to this point, in part because they don't think those jets will be as useful as some of the weapons that they are providing, including these anti-aircraft devices. So we're going to hear that from President Biden today. They understand Zelensky likely emotional, almost certainly will trigger Congress to be that much louder in pushing for the administration to do more, but they are pointing to what they've already done and say this is the correct approach, and they are trying to do it quietly, particularly now that Russia has said they're targeting convoys of weapons coming in from the West. They don't want to advertise that stuff is coming. And one other note, the president, of course, a major symbol, heading to Europe next week to meet with NATO and the European Council. Officials also considering, not locked in, but considering a stop in Poland as well to give thanks to that country and visit with some of the Ukrainian refugees who have had to fled their homeland.
Richard Huss, I would agree. I think you would probably agree with the administration, also with Ambassador McFaul, that it really looked like amateur hour when you had some of our allies putting on websites about jets that they're going to take to our largest base in Europe. It is a positive development that we're now quietly moving weapons into Ukraine quietly, without press releases or great fanfare, getting weapon systems in that Vladimir Putin doesn't know about. I'm curious, though, from what you heard Jonathan say, we are going to be hearing from the president today. How does that sound to you? Is that enough? Do you have any suggestions about what else needs to be done?
No, again, Joe, it sounds right. We've got an indirect strategy. You can kind of look at the micro details of how many of this weapon system and all that. I think too much emphasis has been put on the planes, for what it's worth. They've almost become symbolic. But there's all sorts of other systems that can help you control what goes on in the air, various types of anti-missile systems and all that. So I don't, too many armchair strategists here, micro kind of managing or observing what's going on, but there's no argument what needs to be done, and I think people also understand now we're in a long war. I think at first everyone was talking about it almost as a kind of political demonstration of standing by Ukraine. And people understand now this is serious. We've got to have a pipeline that we can sustain for weeks, months, or however long it takes, however much we can push through it. So I think this is all good. Can I say one other thing? Listening to all these reports and coming, when this is all done, it'll be really interesting to do an intelligence assessment of how we all got so wrong the capabilities of the Russian military. All the assumptions were that they would come in and they would come in like a knife through butter. They obviously are not. And it'd just be interesting to know, what did we have right and what did we have wrong, and what does this tell us going forward? What are the implications that we may have exaggerated what Russia could do? Does this mean we're right or not about other capabilities such as China's and all that? What does this mean for where we have to emphasize in the future in terms of military spending and deployments? I actually think this is a really important issue that's come up here.
It is an important issue, and we have seen what bluntly we've been saying on this show now for years, and that is, as a fighting force, the United States military stands alone. There's not a close second. We've said that time and time again. I remember the lead up into the first and second Gulf Wars. We heard about the Iraqis having the fourth largest military on the face of the earth. I remember seeing a Peter Jennings special where he took something and cracked a map that shattered all of the Middle East because the Iraqi fighting forces were going to be so strong. They were nothing compared to the United States military. And our men and women in uniform, this isn't jingoism. No. This is just the reality. We keep trying to tell people who watch this show domestically and across the world, and leaders do. There's not a close second. People need to stop underestimating the United States. They need to stop underestimating NATO. They need to stop underestimating the power of the United States and the EU combined together, over $40 trillion in GDP a year, the best weapon systems in the world, more importantly, the best fighters in the world.
The best people, the heart and the mind of the U.S. military.
And what we have in the West is something that Xi is learning about very quickly because front page of the Wall Street Journal this morning shows China's economy sagging. Why is it sagging? Because he's moving away from the market reforms that China was trying to practice over the past 2 decades. He's becoming more autocratic. And guess what? Their economic output is going down. It's a closed society. It's not transparent. They have mishandled COVID from the very beginning. They have shut entire cities down because their lack of transparency. They haven't been able to confront COVID, just like they haven't been able to run their economy the way we can in the West.
And all these aspects have an impact on the fighting forces. I mean, nothing compares to a military that is fighting for democracy.
It is Wednesday, the 16th of March of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Yes, do not fret. Do not fret. We are not trying to escalate to World War III here. It's just a lovely egg dish with a very velvety hollandaise sauce. All right. Well, Volodymyr Zelensky gave his presentation to the U.S. Congress and Senate this morning, and I watched some of it, or it was on in the background, so I did listen to it, and it was quite moving. I saw a little bit of the video, and I think that it was produced to great effect. It did pull at the heartstrings, which is what it's meant to do. You know, hearts and minds, right? So, Joe has promised, over $800 million in immediate military aid, which I think that's double what we were giving them previously, before the previous guy did what he did. Oh, which reminds me, I guess Donald Trump has now done a 100% turn on Vlad. He's acting like he never tried to destroy NATO. Well, what's up with this guy? Does he really think that we are all as stupid as the people who voted for him? I know there's like 70-some million that did, and they're that idiotic. I know. And look, they are not innocent in this process. Okay, they are not just pure entities in the midst of this. Please. Anyway, does he really think we're as stupid as those deplorables? Well, we're not. Okay? We have memories, and we don't have amnesia, which is, American amnesia is just an excuse to be lazy, really is what it is. And, actually, it's an excuse to not only be lazy, it's an excuse to, or it's another way of saying, I don't care. There we go. I knew I'd get it out. I haven't had enough coffee this morning. Please give me more coffee. So, the conflict in Ukraine, even though it seems like Russia could be held to a stalemate, well, they were held to stalemates for decades in other conflicts. But I think in this instance, with people protesting on the state propaganda channel, the number one state propaganda channel with the number one propaganda presenter, I guess it's their Candace Owens. I don't know. Vlad likes their Candace Owens a lot. That says volumes. That act was seen by not tens, but a few 100 million people because they could not get to the backup clip fast enough. All other presentations, clips, video, stream, GIFs, whatever, of that incident since then, the sign has been blurred out and there's no audio. But that night, while those people out in the hinterlands, now that's not an insult, that's, how do you think we came up with the term hinterlands? Those who only get their information from the state propaganda channel saw that. Because at the same time, there is a cover-up of how many and who in the Russian military who have been killed. So there's a lot of moms and dads and wives and brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and grandparents out there wondering, what happened to our Igor? We can't seem to find Igor. He went to the recruiting office, and now we don't know where he is. And they may never find out. Until, I don't know, a few decades from now, and the FSB decides to open up their vault. Then we might find out. Vlad is making a very major tactical error, and I'm not talking about his military operation in Ukraine. I'm talking about within the confines of his. It's really hard to call it a hermit kingdom, but that's what he's trying to make it into. Can't be a hermit kingdom when the vast majority of your middle and upper class have free movement around the world and have cell phones and everything else. A little bit different than the hermit kingdom we've all come to know and love. But he is trying to clamp down on dissent, trying. Some people say he is. But when all of those family members and friends wonder where Igor is, he went to the recruiting office. He was stationed, somewhere, and then they sent him to the Donbass, and we haven't heard from him since. We don't know where he is. Igor could be dead, and those family members will not know. Because Vladimir Putin has clamped down on that information within the confines of his vast hermit kingdom. When those people start to get pissed is when the proverbial worm will turn, as if it hasn't already turned. But these things do not happen in a snap. This is not the magic bullet. This is another gradual erosion of autocratic power by its own hand. So we better give Zelensky a little bit more than 800 mil, if you ask me. And this idea that, and I've been hearing this from pundits too, it's useless to have a no-fly zone because most of the shelling has come from artillery. Well, hell, get some drones up there and knock out that artillery. Give me a break, as if we've never done that before in any theater of conflict. Please. It's not just jets. Oh, we might have to get in combat with Russian pilots. Well, I don't know. You might want to just get into combat with some Russian artillery guys. Knock out those artillery nests. I'm sorry. We don't even have to be manning the drones. And they being the Ukrainians, have been doing quite well with their own drone defenses. They just need more and bigger ones, apparently. I did see a rundown of one of these killer drones that apparently has a bit of AI in it. And I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know if that's a good idea. We've seen that movie too many times. I'm not talking just about Terminator. Jeez. We might be going down a perilous path to save democracy. Yes, well, when has that not happened before? Okay. Well, we might as well get into the curated part of the show and let you know what we have in store for you. Well, at the top, I don't really mean to get Joe involved in here so much, that being Joe Scarborough. But that was the newest clip I could snag this morning. That was the most recent. So that was right before Zelensky gave his presentation before Congress and the Senate. And Joe is of the mind that the White House and Congress's response in the first 3 weeks of this Ukraine crisis has been nothing short of historic. And that's great. Let's just hope that it's not bad history that's written when it says that we could have done more. And what is more? Well, it doesn't have to be all warlike, but we have to do something to stop Vlad and his grab of everything. We do. On the rest of the menu, jury selection begins today in the trial of a Republican congressman from Nebraska who is accused of lying to federal authorities about illegal campaign contributions from a Nigerian billionaire. Uh-oh. Stay away from those Nigerian scams, no matter who you are. Several Republicans competing for the party's nomination to run for U.S. Senate in Ohio are facing scrutiny for their deep ties to Russia. And a major Boise hospital went on lockdown after far-right activist Ammon Bundy urged hundreds of his supporters to go to the facility in protest of a child protection case involving one of his family members. It's gotten so bad, he's asked, he doesn't have to ask, he told his supporters, hundreds of them, to go and harass doctors, nurses, cops, their families at their homes at 3 a.m. in the morning. And did I say this guy's running for governor of Idaho? All right. After the break, we move to the chef's table where journalists of Belarus's oldest newspaper were handed prison terms in the latest move in a relentless government crackdown on independent media. And Germany announced a 10-point plan to combat far-right extremism that includes disarming about 1,500 suspected extremists and tightening background checks for those wanting to acquire guns. Wait until Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Berbert hear about this. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by the Kelly Lincoln, and we thank the Kelly Lincoln for doing so. To the left of the chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page, and if you could afford to send us what you might spend, even in these inflationary times, which are really just price gouging. But if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, that would help us pay our bills and continue flying under the radar so that we can continue to be this bulwark against dark forces arrayed against not only the United States, I know you've heard this before, but against representative democracy worldwide. Thank you for your generosity. It has allowed us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. All kidding aside, thank you for your generosity, and we need it, to be frank. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are forever thankful for Tom for doing so. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other platforms, and you know who they are. Just a reminder, the show notes and links are where you can find the real reportage, because sometimes I abbreviate. I not only just give this so-called humorous mystery science theater 800 million. I not only do it in that format, but sometimes I abbreviate, and the full article can be found through the show notes and links, so check it out. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 and the deep archive of not only West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, but all of the shows over these many, almost 11 years. We're within weeks of becoming 24/7, 365 on the air for 11 years. Yeah, happy birthday to us. But you can find all shows of Netroots Radio and the Netroots Radio Library at the Internet Archive, at archive.org. Yes. And there are links in the show notes and links for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy show, as well as the Justice Department, to the specific library part, or the specific shows in the library. But we'll get the Netroots Radio Library General link in the Internet Archive on our homepage when we update our homepage, and that should be happening real soon. Okay, well, time's a-wasting, as it usually is. Time never stops. Oh, guess what? I guess the Congress said we're going to stay on one time system. It's going to be daylight savings. So does that mean that we don't have to fall back? Are we going to fall back, but then we're not going to have to spring ahead? Come on. Just tell me that when it comes to the fall, I don't have to do this all over again with the idea of, I get an extra hour. Do I? Boy, it was only yesterday that I actually felt that I was almost maybe 90% recovered from that hour taken away from me. Well, all of us. But boy, did it kick my rear. Anyway, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fine Smothered Benedict Wednesdays is out of the Associated Press by Grant Schulte. Jury selection begins today, Wednesday, in the trial of a little-known Republican congressman from Nebraska who is accused of lying to federal authorities about illegal campaign contributions from a Nigerian billionaire. The trial of U.S. Representative Jeff Fortenberry in Los Angeles. I don't think Fortenberry is that unknown, but we'll go with it. And his trial in Los Angeles will be the first of a sitting member of Congress in 21 years. Could that be from the fellow in Louisiana who was hiding cash in his icebox? I wonder. And could all but end the political career of a congressman seen as a reliable conservative who coasted to easy wins, but isn't a familiar name outside of Nebraska. Fortenberry, who is running for re-election, took a big political hit when prosecutors announced the charges, and his indictment has already divided Nebraska Republicans who backed him for years. You have people on both sides, said Philip Young, a longtime Republican campaign and public relations consultant in Lincoln. If he's acquitted, that probably makes the decision tougher for a lot of Republicans. If he's convicted, it's much more of an uphill climb for him politically. Many prominent Nebraska Republicans have already dumped the 9-term incumbent in favor of a young conservative state lawmaker who wants to oust Fortenberry in the party's May 10th primary. Senator Mike Flood, a former Speaker of the Nebraska legislature, jumped into the race amid concerns that Fortenberry's indictment could cost the GOP an otherwise safe seat. The First Congressional District runs through a large stretch of rural eastern Nebraska, but also includes the liberal-leaning city of Lincoln. How liberal are they? Nebraska State Senator Patty Pansing Brooks, a progressive state lawmaker from Lincoln, is likely to win the Democratic nomination for the district. Flood has won the endorsements of Governor Pete Ricketts. Former Governor Dave Heineman was another, and another leading Republican. Lieutenant Governor Mike Foley has stood behind Fortenberry. Now, Fortenberry has pleaded not guilty to charges he intentionally misled FBI agents and prosecutors who are investigating a $30,000 donation from a Nigerian billionaire of Lebanese descent, Gilbert Chagori, during a 2016 fundraiser in L.A. Prosecutors allege Fortenberry lied about what he knew on 2 occasions, an interview at his Lincoln home and a follow-up meeting in Washington, and he did not properly disclose the contribution in his campaign filings. Julie Carr Smythe of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Several Republicans competing for the party's nomination to run for the U.S. Senate in Ohio are facing scrutiny for their ties to Russia as the country intensifies its war against Ukraine. Just don't call it a war in Russia. Much of the attention is focused on former Ohio Republican Party Chair Jane Timken, whose husband's family founded a company that does business in Russia. But other candidates in the race to succeed, retiring GOP Senator Rob Portman, wasn't he at that table in Moscow on the 4th of July? I think he was. Including J.D. Vance and Mike Gibbons, also have links to business deals in Russia that could become vulnerabilities in the May 3rd primary. While domestic issues generally dominate midterm political contests, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, with its harrowing images of civilian casualties, has become an animating subject of the competitive Senate race in Ohio, which has a large Ukrainian-American population. In a race with several millionaire candidates, the war is highlighting the risks that come with being wealthy and having tangled investment interests involving foreign countries. Well, you know, if your nation was as important as your money, you might take into consideration where your money is being invested in now, wouldn't you? The easiest target has long been Timken, whose husband sits on the board of the like-named Fortune 500 ball bearing manufacturer based in North Canton, Ohio. Even before Ukraine, her adversary sought to pin the Timken company's international business dealings on Timken. Timken Company last week suspended its operations in Russia, where it has a manufacturing plant and an 8-year-old relationship with United Wagon Company. Well, guess what? Bring those jobs back home. Boone of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. This is another story of the perils of vigilante justice and why, in a representative democracy, you need to punch these Nazis and not let them get away with it anymore. A major Boise hospital went on lockdown for about an hour yesterday, Tuesday, after far-right activists, I guess that's a nice way of calling it, Ammon Bundy, urged supporters to go to the facility in protest of a child protection case involving one of his family friends. The St. Luke's Health System put the Boise Medical Center on lockdown and began diverting incoming patients about 1:30 p.m. yesterday. Several police cars from the Idaho State Police and Boise Patrol Department responded to the hospital for the protests. A few dozen protesters stationed themselves outside various hospital doors and buildings, some speculating on social media about whether the facility could be accessed via underground tunnels. The protesters appeared to mostly stay on the sidewalks, however, and the lockdown was lifted shortly before 3 p.m. Earlier in the day, Bundy released a statement on YouTube warning that if an acquaintance's young child was not returned to the family after a hearing yesterday afternoon, the patriot groups would take action. Bundy later released another video telling people that child protection workers were poised to move the baby from the hospital to a foster home and telling them to show up at the facility immediately. Now, the baby was temporarily removed from family custody last Friday after officials determined the 10-month-old was suffering from severe malnourishment and at risk of injury or death, according to a statement from police in the city of Meridian near Boise. The baby's parents had refused to let officers check on the child's welfare after the family canceled a medical appointment. The pediatrician called the cops because that child was supposed to go in to make sure that they had been giving it the care that it required to live. And Bundy is saying that those parental rights are more important than that child's. This is vigilante justice done for theater at the expense of a child's life. How is this any different from what Putin is doing by bombing hospitals, maternity wards, and children in parks? All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, who's your baddie? Warning, thematic spoilers. Okay, so The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves, who did Cloverfield and 2 Planet of the Apes, co-written by Peter Craig, who wrote Bad Boys for Life and both Mockingjays. I should also mention director of photography Greig Fraser, who is straight off of Dune, and supervising art director Grant Armstrong, who most recently designed Spider-Man Far From Home, because, oh boy, does this movie look good. Early on, Bruce Wayne says the criminals think he's hiding in the shadows, but they're wrong, because he is the shadows. Go Craig and Reeves, archetypal Batman line. And yeah, never has Gotham been more dark, or more wet, but even nightly rains can't wash away the grime, or the crime. Never has Gotham felt so overwhelming, like it's too much for one vigilante to handle. Speaking of which, Robert Pattinson gives us a gaunt, goth-haunted, overtaxed Bruce Wayne 2 years into his war to clean up the city. We learn he's burning through money and doesn't care because now we finally hate the rich, and the film needs Wayne to not be the Jeff Bezos of crime fighting. No more mansion and cave, Bruce and Alfred are based in Wayne Tower in the city. Also, Batman works with the cops more than in any previous film because even though Gotham is all about bad cops and corruption, we have to show that there are good cops too. At least it means they don't underuse Jeffrey Wright as Gordon. Paul Dano, they've transformed the Riddler into a fringe loony serial killer. The Batsuit is like Kevlar on steroids. The Batmobile looks and sounds like Satan's muscle car. Everything was going so well when the giant penny drops to reveal it's all one big daddy story. You see, originally Bruce Wayne horrifically lost his parents, causing him to devote his life and fortune to a war on crime. But over the past few decades, it's been changed to Bruce Wayne having lost his father. Oh, and that chick who wore the pearls and furs Dad bought for her. And so also in The Batman. Oh, guys, and it is almost all guys behind this film. So close, and still the same lame. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Emily Schwing. When he was little, Alessandro Chiarenza's grandmother used to read him bedtime stories about dinosaurs. And she would always tell him the same thing.
but these things were not living here. They were living like in America and in Asia, so not here in Italy.
That bedtime story first began to change for Italian kids back in the 1990s.
So we've found plenty of dinosaur records from dinosaur fossils. We started in the past decades to recover footprints, but then most importantly, we're starting finding bones and now complete skeletons of dinosaurs.
Chiarenza, a paleontologist at the University of Vigo in Spain, is part of a team that recently uncovered nearly a dozen complete dinosaur skeletons, a first in Italy. The discovery is documented in the journal Scientific Reports, and it once again upends the bedtime story, so to speak.
Usually you don't find multiple complete individuals all together, and it's something historically very rare.
Back in 1994 in Trieste, a municipality in northeastern Italy, scientists discovered Antonio, a small hadrosaur or duck-billed dinosaur. The skeleton's about 3.5 meters long and very well preserved.
And one peculiar feature from this dinosaur was that it was relatively small from the close cousins that were inhabiting at the time North America and Asia. And dinosaurs from these exotic lands were quite big. They're basically coexisting with the T-Rex or relatives of the T-Rex. These were like the main predators of these animals. So they were quite big.
When he was discovered, scientists theorized that Antonio was a victim of something called the island rule. The site of Antonio's discovery, Villaggio del Pescatore, was once part of an island that sat in the middle of a proto-Mediterranean sea known as Tethys. In fact, this is how Antonio came to acquire his scientific name, Tethyschadros insularis. Insularis means from an island, according to Chiarenza, and as the old story goes, Antonio would have been a dwarf species because of limited resources on that island. But this all changed when Bruno, another hadrosaur of the same species, was discovered.
We know that if you cut a dinosaur skeleton, like you can see some sort of structure which is more comparable or analogous to what you see in a tree ring. So you count them and you can see how old these animals are. The bigger skeleton, Bruno, was older in age than the younger one, the skeleton of Antonio, the one that was smaller in size.
While Antonio is roughly the size of a small car, Bruno is a meter longer, closer to the size of a larger minivan.
So Antonio is a complete skeleton. Bruno, it's 75% complete. There is another skeleton which is still on the ground and waits to be completely recovered and prepared. And this is actually, its nickname is Rocco, and it's potentially even bigger than Bruno.
The discovery of Bruno and Rocco have totally upended Antonio's story, and so have other findings at the site.
Dinosaurs were not the only fossils from the area. We also find shrimps, plants. We find crocodiles. We find also other dinosaurs that still are pending at proper descriptions, flying reptiles like pterosaurs.
Chiarenza says he also imagines the region as a marginal marine area.
Probably more mainland connection. So you would have found this vegetated beach surrounded by like a little bit of higher ground or more vegetated and forested areas that were sort of going towards continental Europe. You probably would have seen these dinosaurs like Tethyschadros potentially moving together, like in a group, maybe drinking in, on a river.
The team also collected new data on the geology of the area. They redated the rocks to 80 million years ago, which is 10 million years older than thought.
Which also led us to think that at the time, the paleogeography of the area was actually different. It wasn't the island archipelago that it was speculated before, but it was actually a more continuous with larger, more extended land masses. That probably were offering a connections between not only the western part of Europe and the eastern part of Europe, but with also Asia and eventually Africa. So probably was supporting more population of larger animals that had more available resources.
So what comes next in the new version of this Italian dinosaur saga? Chiarenza says he's particularly interested in looking at what he and colleagues can learn from past changes in climate.
trying to learn which species might have been more sensitive to some climatic change, and trying to infer what they might meant for their adaptations.
He says the next chapter in this story will be to parse out how changes in climate over time drove the distribution of dinosaurs across Europe into Asia and then other parts of the world. For 60 Second Science, I'm Emily Schwing.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Last July, several GOP senators combined their 5-watt intellects to charge that inflation was rising because of, quote, insane tax and spending spree of President Biden and the Democrats. Never mind that the insane spending is for such sensible, productive, and enormously popular national needs as child care and jobless benefits. Mitch McConnell's rabidly partisan flock saw the chance to politicize the public's legitimate worries about rising prices. You poor consumers are made to pay more for basics, they squawked, because of Socialist Joe's investment in grassroots people. Follow the ricocheting pinball of the GOP's logic. 1, they say that helping hard-hit families induces them to refuse to go to work. 2, this creates blockages in the global supply chain. 3, this causes shortages of everything. 4, this forces corporate bosses to raise all prices, which 5, slams the middle class and poor, so 6, lazy workers cause inflation. Whoa! Rube Goldberg couldn't have dreamed up a more fantastical diagram to deflect attention from what's really happening, namely that instead of an inflation problem, we have a corporate greed problem. Of course, the greedmeisters insist that their pursuit of excess corporate profits has not driven any price surges. In our economy of free market competition, they snap, prices are established by the law of supply and demand. It's the magic of the marketplace, they explain. But magicians don't do magic, they perform illusions. And the illusion of free market competition implodes when it hits the reality that our economy doesn't remotely resemble a competitive marketplace. This is Jim Hightower saying, for some 40 years, corporate-directed government policies have been transforming America into a monopoly nation, letting the few gouge the many. That's where inflation comes from.
The 2022 election returns are rolling in from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The city of Nashville has had a seat in the United States House of Representatives for as long as Tennessee has been a state, that is, for 147 years. But no longer. Tennessee Governor Bill Lee recently signed into law a new political map drawn up by his fellow Republicans in the state legislature. That map destroys Nashville's seat in Congress by splicing and dicing that city's voters into 3 adjoining rural conservative Republican districts. That newly gerrymandered map does 4 things. First, it destroys the congressional district's community of interest, which Nashville voters share with each other, but not with the rural voters. Second, it ensures that Nashville's voters will essentially be irrelevant in their new districts. Third, it eviscerates the voting power of black voters and guarantees their votes back of the bus status. And fourth, it guarantees that Democrats will lose and Republicans will win another seat in the House of Representatives. What's most disturbing is that what's happening in Tennessee and to Nashville is not the exception, but rather the rule, because the Supreme Court in 2019, 5-4, ruled that federal courts may not in any way remedy the democracy-killing manipulation of partisan gerrymandering. And so, now we witness democracy being destroyed, one gerrymandered district at a time. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. Albert Shanker was fed up. Mr. Shanker taught math at a junior high school in Astoria, Queens. He and his colleagues felt they were underpaid and not respected. The assistant principal of the school even spied on their classrooms with binoculars. The teachers felt they had little power to change things because of how divided the teachers were. There were more than 100 representative organizations dividing New York teachers along lines of ethnicity, gender, and subject matter. The Teachers Guild was the only group affiliated with organized labor, but they only had 1,500 members of the approximately 45,000 teachers in New York City. Shanker decided to join the Guild anyway, and with the support of his fellow teacher Dan Sanders and the American Federation of Teachers organizer David Selden, they started holding meetings. The meetings included talks about unions, drinks, and guitar music. More and more teachers began to attend. In 1959, 1,200 members of the High School Teachers Association walked off the job in a wildcat strike. Even though the HSTA was a rival organization, the Guild members supported the strike. When the high school teachers won a wage increase, momentum began to build. And on this day in labor history, the year was 1960. The two groups merged to form the United Federation of Teachers Local 2 of the AFT. The new union still only represented a fraction of the New York City teachers. Yet they decided to test their power and hold a one-day strike. Less than 6,000 teachers participated, but the new union had proven its willingness to act. In December of 1961, UFT became the bargaining union for all New York teachers. And out of these first steps, the UFT today represents nearly 200,000 teachers and is a powerful force for labor rights in New York.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of about 62. Very foggy at the moment, and we will be partly cloudy later in the day, winds light and variable. Lows in the upper 30s tonight, with cloudy skies early and giving way to cloudy skies late. Or we'll be starting off partly cloudy, Winds will remain light and variable, and cloudy skies tomorrow will become partly cloudy later, and the high will be in the low 60s. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon stands at 423,099, with 500 confirmed deceased. I'm gonna wear my mask. Pollen is rated as none outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 28 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at level 5. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.39 inches. Visibility is less than a half mile, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 52 degrees with heavy rain. Paris is 58 degrees and sunny. Rome is 64 and fair. Kyiv is 37 and sunny. Kabul is 58 and clear. Hong Kong is 70 degrees and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 53 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 70 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 47 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is a balmy 58 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Yoris Karamanu of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Journalists of Belarus's oldest newspaper were handed prison terms yesterday, Tuesday, in the latest move in a relentless government crackdown on independent media. Nasha Neva's chief editor, Yahor Martinosevich, and journalist Audrey Skirko each were sentenced to 2.5 years in prison on charges of dodging communal payments they have rejected as politically driven. They have remained in custody since their arrest in July. The newspaper was blocked in July and banned as extremist in November. On the 115th anniversary of its founding, the ban has exposed anyone who would publish or repost Nasha materials to prison terms of up to 7 years. Most other Nasha journalists have left the country and continued to publish the newspaper online, changing its domain to bypass the blocking. Nasha Neva extensively covered the massive anti-government protests that erupted after Lukashenko was handed a sixth term after an August 2020 presidential vote that was denounced as rigged by the opposition and the West. Belarusian authorities responded with a sweeping crackdown that saw more than 35,000 people arrested and thousands beaten by police. Overall, 32 Belarusian journalists are in custody, serving their sentences or awaiting trial.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press journalist Frank Jordans brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Germany's top security officials announced a 10-point plan to combat far-right extremism in the country that includes disarming about 1,500 suspected extremists and tightening background checks for those wanting to acquire guns. Interior Minister Nancy Faeser said the far right poses the biggest extremist threat to democracy in Germany and said authorities would seek to tackle the issue through prevention and tough measures. Authorities will work to remove gun licenses from suspected extremists, crack down on incitement spread online through social networks, and combat conspiracy theories online. Faeser said an emphasis will also be put on rooting out extremists who work in government agencies, including the security forces. America, are you listening? Reports about far-right extremists among the police and military in Germany have raised concerns because of fears that they could use privileged information to target political opponents. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.